So today we have Stephen O'Connell, Associate Director and Program Manager of RebelBio. Would you be able to kind of give us an overview of what RebelBio do?
Sure.
And what's kind of different and unique about RebelBio as opposed to other investment programs?
Absolutely. Obviously, thanks for having me on board. It's great to be on Tech Talk London. So RebelBio is a pre-seed life sciences and health tech investment program. We are funded by a venture capital fund called SOSV, which is Sean O'Sullivan Ventures. Our founder set this fund up in the early 2000s, in 2010, and from there we've been making investments all over the world in pre-seed technologies across multiple verticals. SOSV, we have over 80 staff in more than 7 offices worldwide. Our London office focuses, as I said previously, on life sciences and health tech and biotech. So we kind of have the broad terminology to cover all the bases. We have a hardware program in China, cross-border internet programs in Asia also, food tech, blockchain, and also a later stage biotech program in San Francisco as well.
I mean, would you be able to, over the last couple of years, I've seen a ton of money being flooded into the biotech sector.
Yeah.
And on one hand, it's incredible, but on the other, it's not like every other tech startup. The barrier to entry is extremely high. The advice is incredibly nuanced and specific. The principles of product don't really translate to a biotech company.
Yeah.
Would you be able to kind of go over the current climate of biotech investment and kind of how easier it is to launch a biotech company in the UK now?
Sure. We've had a number of reasons why the costs and barriers to entry in life sciences and biotech have become so drastically cheaper. One is obviously, as they talk about consistently, brought up is the Carlson curve, which is the costs of sequencing and synthesis are decreasing exponentially. So much so that what used to cost on average for the first human genome was about $2.5 billion. Don't quote me on that figure, but it's upwards of to $1,000 a genome now per person. So if that gives you an indication of something that's gotten over 12 million times cheaper in the last couple of years, it's these kind of jumps in technology and feasibility has led to the accessibility for early stage companies to start developing in this space. We also have a lot of decentralized resources too, so it's a lot of service marketplace providers that can allow you to do R&D, clinical trials without much capital being required, as they kind of cover a lot of the costs themselves through other providers and partnerships. And that's also led to a fundamental kind of as I say, as a platform, a lot of platform technologies allow for people as individuals, researchers, scientists, technologists to start looking into areas like life sciences.
I mean, in terms of the unique challenges of launching a biotech company, there are other great investment programs, EF, and I think Founders Factory are half decent. You got Wayra as well. Yeah. The challenge of launching a biotech company is it's pretty stark. I mean, would you be able to kind of highlight the challenges and then kind of how RebelBio actually help with these biotech companies?
Sure. Tyler, your point, product market fit in life sciences is a lot tougher compared to conventional software companies, which all you need is AWS hosting, cloud computing credits to get moving and get a UX, a user interface, and a build. You could sell products online pretty quickly. With life sciences, you're dealing with kind of more or less regulators as your first customers, in a sense that they're the champion that once you apply all the knowledge and get through the regulatory pathway and the hurdles, generate viable data, strong scientific data also, that will help you move as fast as you can. But again, it's much more complex landscape than conventional areas.
That's really interesting, because extrapolating product market fit in the biotech sector is a completely different beast. Do you guys help companies with the legal aspects and then kind of help orchestrate that process? Because it's a nuanced and a difficult and an expensive process.
Yeah. I mean, we focus as much like how we help address product market fit is the product development, business development. kind of all being kind of intricately linked, but also doing these things concurrently. We bring in IP specialists to assist. We're not, they're not part of our team offering legal advice, but they're specialists in the life science sector, specifically around IP. And then also understanding and helping companies engage with regulators, regulatory affairs consultants and regulatory experts as early as possible, so they have a working narrative moving forward. That will allow them to have a clear idea of when product market fit will happen, but also explaining to individual stakeholders like investors, other partners, and other for example, public funding such as grants will enable them to give people a clear idea of when they're going to go to market. And that's usually all you need in an early stage science company to help de-risk and present an investment opportunity.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, in terms of the investment landscape into biotech, I mean, I'm guessing it's quite niche, right? Because you're going to have scientists and people on board to actually evaluate these technologies. From a funding standpoint, I mean, do you guys help these founders to understand what terms to take and what terms not to take?
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of our core offering as well, because we're an early stage investor, so we're investing literally at the earliest point we can in the company at the pre-seed level. So traditionally you have the pre-seed round, the seed round, Series A, Series B, Series C onwards. So we're working with these guys from day one, and we want to make sure that working relationship is as strong as possible. We also need to, with our being investors ourselves, we have a co-investment network of people that we kind of have vetted that are active investors in the space. They work closely with companies and founders, much like ourselves. So we try and develop that kind of really good working relationship with both the companies and other investors, so that when we are making introductions, we know that the company is the right fit for that investor, and that investor is the right fit for the company.
That's amazing. So like you're really holding their hands throughout the process.
Yeah, to an extent. Yeah. But eventually you have to let their hands go, because it's the big bad world at the end of the day. But I mean, we've never, not to quote me on that either, but we want to make sure we have a very strong relationship and giving, helping these startups and founders become self-educated as well, because it's just the same principle as give a man a fish, he'll survive for a day. Teach a man a fish, he'll survive for his entire lifetime. Yeah. And I think it's the same principle that should be applied everywhere, especially around fundraising, because that process is going to be continuous for that founding team. We're not always going to be there, but it's important to give them the lasting education that will matter.
I can imagine. You invited us to a pitching event. It was a couple of weeks back. Sure. What did you guys call it? It was I called it a pitch fest.
Sure, a showcase. It's like a community showcase.
Community showcase. Yeah.
We're based at the White City Incubator at Imperial College in the White City campus. So we've got a great community here within this building alone of great entrepreneurs, as well as later stage companies across science and technology. So it's important to get that event to just show the companies what we have on offer and what companies we have in-house for the 3-month program. The
batch was really strong. We spoke to quite a few other companies and they came and saw the pitch as well. Yeah. They said that this year the batch was particularly strong. Yeah. In terms of, we spoke to quite a few of the founders after the pitch, and it was a really novel process for myself and Priyesh, because we saw the vulnerability. So we saw their brilliance, but then we saw them improving throughout their pitch. And what a lot of the founders said was, this is like a program, but we actually have to work. Yeah. What particular core focuses do you guys kind of impart upon them, or maybe the right question would be, what areas of focus do you really work with the founders on? Sure. Because every single founder I spoke to said, this has been great, but we're tired, and but we get pushed in the right way. Would you be able to kind of elaborate on how you guys do that?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, it's always a crucible. It's a trial by fire. Yeah. Because that's what it's going to be like. We're compressing the first 18 months of a business into 3 months. So we're really front loading a lot of the knowledge and intel they need to advance the business quickly. Yeah. as I said previously, we focus a lot on product market fit, product development, business development, and fundraising. These aren't often broken into 3 separate components because they actually happen concurrently.
Yeah.
Because the earlier they're prepped for fundraising and the more proactive they are, the easier that experience is going to be. But it's still always going to be a tough experience. The average for securing an investment, you have to talk to over 100 investors just to get maybe 10 conversations that might lead to 1 term sheet. So in terms of sample size, you need to increase that sample size exponentially within 3 to 6 months, because that's there's no guarantees on when funding will be in the bank account from term sheet signed to the actual date of when the money's in the bank.
Yeah.
As you saw from the showcase, we work a lot heavily on communication. Science communication being a core component. We really want to bring in the emotional element of storytelling to help the science and the impact resonate with people. As these are complicated products, and we want to uncomplicate that entire story, because these people are here. They're really obsessed with actual issues that we can address with science meaningfully.
For a science company, it must be quite difficult, right, from a communication standpoint, because on the one hand, they have to explain their science to a person with an average IQ, like myself. And so they have to be able to be skilled at telling their story in a visually and kind of emotionally compelling way. Yeah. But on the other hand, when they're pitching in front of crowds, there's going to be a couple of investors. So they also have to explain the nuances of their science and why they're different, and their R&D process without going too much into their IP. Have you seen like a common thread in terms of how a founder can kind of navigate that process? Because although not all of the pitches were perfect, a lot of the founders were nervous at the time. They did a great job. I mean, the storyline was brilliant. They explained it in layman terms, and then they delved into the technical nuances of their science. I mean, do you guys kind of use specific frameworks to help them kind of organize their content and their story?
Yeah, I mean, it's iterative depending on the type of audience that you're presenting to. It could be like a showcase event, which is more like more of a formal event where you're pitching or communicating to an audience, and then the traditional meeting format, which is a one-to-one, is where you would talk more of scientific, in depth, and technical, especially around the financials of your business. So it just depends. I mean, we're kind of giving founders advice to communicate in a number of different ways. It's never just a one-size-fits-all format for communicating. It has to be adapted to every type of audience. So it'd be an in-depth scientific audience, or investors, or just general layperson, which can consist of both. But I think what people really love at the end of the day is really good storytelling, and I think that's really important to have that as a core component of what we're doing with these guys, because we really want that to work, and that's something that companies that are coming out of our program are using to win competitions later on, secure more investment. If they can crack the emotional resonance side of things, I think that's a really good thing to take home after working with us for 3 months.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, in terms of like I said, I mean, the batch your current batch is very, very strong. Would you be able to kind of just highlight a couple of favorites? I mean,
sure.
It's like having a kid. I mean, you can't really point out your favorites, but you
yeah,
always have them.
It would be unfair. It would be unfair of me to highlight specific companies, because I love them all equally. Going back to what you mentioned earlier on. I mean, we've RebelBio is one company.
RebelBio?
Yeah, RebelBio that identify using microfluidics the best combination of chemotherapy drugs for triple negative breast cancer.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so that's genomically silent, and it's important to identify because you can't diagnose that with blood tests to identify cancer-causing genes. So it only manifests if you have triple negative breast cancer, it only manifests after the cancer is present. So it's a really amazing kind of more or less a platform as a biopsy. So they take the cancer biopsy, put it in through microfluidics, and then identify the best chemotherapy combination per person. So it's individualized.
Incredible.
The data you can generate from that is amazing. And I've know people personally that have passed away from cancers, and specifically breast cancer. So I really understand the importance of making advances in that area is really key. Also you're probably familiar with Biosapien, another great company, fantastic team. We have Rise, BioProtocol. We have a number of different other teams that we're really happy to work with and bring them from all over the world as well. So it's very international.
Previously, we talked about why biotech has come so far.
Sure.
In terms of the initial barriers right now, I mean, in an ideal fairy tale world, I mean, what barriers do you hope could be removed for biotech companies to really thrive?
I mean, we're looking, comparing our regulatory framework versus the US within Europe, it's very fragmented, and I think Europe is obviously a very risk-averse area to do business in. We've had a lot of traditional biotech, pharmaceutical companies, drug companies making therapies, but it's usually a lot of the cases of early stage startups is that they're going to spin up their R&D here in Europe or the UK and move that to the US as their target market initially, only for them later on to revisit Europe and the UK as an established drug company, or maybe they get acquired by a later stage company. So what I would like to see is European barriers to regulation becoming a bit more adjustable, a bit more, have more industry engagement with early stage companies, because these technologies are advancing exponentially. We've got, as I say, they're moving from traditional CRISPR gene editing now to base editing, which is the next iteration of that technology, and that happened within less than 5 years. When compared against computing, that's substantial. And the impact and net good it can have is higher as well, because it affects human health and the ability to target disease and improve the human condition.
That's really interesting. You say a lot of the companies are starting here and then going to the US. I think we spoke to a founder, I forgot his name, but I think he was doing some elements in the US, here in the UK, and then went to the US. I think it was for trials or something?
Correct, yeah. A lot of, in the US, it's common to do clinical trials in other countries, but
to acquire
usually,
the data.
Exactly, you need to generate a viable data packet, and then that data packet has to be compliant with, for example, the FDA as a regulator, so they can move through the approval stages. And then that will help that company secure more investment, scale, or secure grant funding. But it's kind of more or less rigged for companies to favour the US market until Europe and
eases up regulation.
ECJ and other European Commission start addressing these regulatory barriers and try to make them a bit more amenable, so companies can actually develop and scale here. But it's just more or less how the world works currently, especially where science companies are involved.
Yeah, well, we spoke to Khatija last week, the CEO of Biosapiens, and she gave a personal account of her father suffering from cancer, and she talked about China just being an absolute, a great place to just test your technology, because there's hardly any regulatory hurdles. Have you seen, outside of RebelBio, have you seen startups go and test new technologies in China and then come back here and then go to the US? Have you seen that before?
I haven't. We haven't had any personal stories of Chinese startups. I mean, we have a lot of programs in Asia focusing on actually traditional technology, app, mobile, cross-border internet technologies. One story that came to light quite a while ago was so the development of immunotherapies is very common, where people it's common now to take cells from your own immune system, engineer them so they become T cells, re-engineer T cells, and introduce them back in your body so they fight cancer. Apparently, within Chinese regulatory system, they approved a woman's CAR T therapy within 1 day.
Whoa! Okay.
And compared to the US, which takes upwards of 3 years to even just get approval to test on embryos, it's lightning pace. It's due to the single party system, and also that they understand that they're at the frontier of hardware engineering production. They're going to be at the frontier of life sciences as well, and these are the things the concessions they make to help advance the pace of the regulatory barriers. I mean, the regulatory barriers for any market, specifically science products, is why it's so expensive to have to develop a product in the life sciences domain. So I think that they've really outpaced the rest of the world in a number of areas in life sciences.
And will continue to do so now.
It's
going to be technology standpoint. They're able to acquire more data because
it's going to look like in the next few years that people will be able to get their immunotherapy or cancer therapy done for cents to the dollar compared to the millions that it will cost for an FDA approved gene therapy product in the US. More than likely there will be...
It's about $500,000 in the US for immunotherapy, right?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Upwards. So there's quite a lot of cases of that being kind of more or less monopolies on it. So I think that's another area where kind of as the Chinese FDA are operating under, and it's incredible to see just the pace that they're willing. Like, these people are consenting to have these trials done on them, so it's much like ourselves consenting to clinical trials. I think with the markets, with the system there, it's common sense that they will be able to make approvals happen quite quickly.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. Is immunotherapy available in the UK?
To my knowledge, I think so. I think there are some.
Really?
I just don't know if the CAR-T immunotherapies are still approved. There's a number of companies based in the UK like Autolus and Gamma Delta Therapeutics. They're immunotherapy companies that focus on CAR-T. So they're working through the approval pathway, but they're working on getting approval in the US.
That's incredible. Incredible. But, talking about you personally. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for being on camera. What kind of motivates you to do the job you do? I mean, it clearly looks stressful and intense, but what you're doing is incredibly impactful. I mean, especially if some of these companies, even if a couple of these companies take off, I mean, the impact on cancer treatments is just huge. What inspires you to do the work that you do?
Sure. I mean, I've always been interested in life sciences. I mean, my background is an undergraduate in biotechnology, a kind of an interdisciplinary master's in biotechnology and business, and I've had the lot of fortune to meet some great mentors. They were science entrepreneurs and also business entrepreneurs. Worked in a startup that makes rapid, affordable diagnostics, originally targeting dengue and Zika. So you can make a $20 or $30 test to diagnose, say, your loved one if they're sick at home with no lab training needed. So it really resonated with me as a company. And that was targeting dengue and Zika at the time in Central America and Honduras, because they were major health concerns. The company's still active, and I got involved with them as an early stage employee. Wasn't a founder, but really interested by the passion of individuals, especially tackling these major issues, especially around human health, and that resonated with me. And I was fortunate enough to have the chance to move into the venture capital side of things through this program, working with SOSV and RebelBio to help other founders as kind of a force multiplier for support. Because I think as an early stage company that I previously worked in, in the ecosystem in Ireland, it just wasn't enough support to get companies moving faster. But I think we have that in London, which is nice, and I would really like to help share those learnings from London to Ireland one day. But it's about the maturity of the ecosystem and the number of people there and the universities, and you kind of have this, a focused supports that work really well. I think I was just always happy to, if I couldn't work in startup, I'd work in some capacity to help other founders get their technologies to market faster as well.
That's incredible. Your next cohort will probably be in 2020, right?
Correct.
Well, when is that going to be?
First quarter of 2020.
First quarter of 2020. Now, in terms of inviting startups and founders, I mean, what would you say your sweet spot is? I mean, different investment programs like EF, they get strangers in a room, get them to network, and then create a company from scratch. You guys aren't that earlier on, right? So you're looking for someone with at least an idea and some development.
Yeah, we look for a kind of ideally a pre-assembled team with a proof of concept. So that's either clinical, not even clinical data, preclinical data that might indicate that there's potential movement in this space and it's an exciting area. to be involved in. Also, kind of a company or a team with very in-depth knowledge of the market and the landscape are very important to us as well, because we need to work with founders that are aware of what else is out there in the space, and if they have if they're the first company in that space, then they have first mover advantage, and we can really help companies in that juncture. I think otherwise it's just getting a bit further along, moving towards, say, the minimum viable product, the MVP, some strong preclinical data, and just a really good foundational team that has the right skill set to help lead this business. I think that's what really resonates with us.
So, I mean, I'm guessing you're not only taking people from Imperial College, right? All universities from all research labs across the UK, so UCL and
we've taken spin-outs, we've taken independent researchers, we've taken just self-started, motivated founders that have built something through an incubator program or an investment program or an accelerator. All walks of life that come from all over the world to develop meaningful, impactful businesses with science. So I mean it's pretty open. We just look for on average we're getting over 500 applications per cohort, so it's a number of it's not often the earlier submission the better, but we need to make sure that the founders are really serious about what they're doing, and it's not just an idea they scribbled on a back of a piece of paper. It's something they have already put work into, even by bootstrapping, putting their own cash to fund some of their existing research, or if they had grant funding, and then showing us that they're really obsessed with solving these problems. They're the things that we like.
Amazing. And so you said the first quarter, and you'll be hoping to bring in people that have done some element of research and are at the big, probably around the MVP or just before the MVP stage. And that's quite significant in the biotech space, right?
It is and it isn't. I mean, a lot of people can have just in a general, more in-depth idea of their thesis and building on that, and showing us that they're going to think about this. They're playing the long game, which is really important, because it's not something you can just do in 2 years, especially in this industry. You can't go public within 2 years. It might be very fortunate if you can, but highly unlikely. But if you're playing the long game, you're thinking 5 to 8 to 10 years. Maybe going public, maybe selling early, maybe exiting. But being aware of that whole process is useful.
We spoke after the pitch competition. What do you call it? The
showcase.
The showcase. Yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna dub your voice. I'm gonna dub you saying showcase.
I brought up a point about charities. I mean, do you think like charities should actually welcome startups into their ecosystem, given the fact that they're doing research as well?
I mean, I've seen as Cancer Research UK are launching a number of new initiatives. As one example, I think that's really proactive, because we engage with Cancer Research UK a lot.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We're very supportive of what they're trying to achieve. They're working with different groups to further research, spinning out research as well, which is really important, because I think it's going to have to leave the lab eventually, and that's why a lot of grant funds exist, is to make research commercially viable. And the only way you're going to do that is get it into the hands of people and other labs and sell products. And when you sell products and potentially explore new markets, there's new opportunities there as well. Also, there's with creating new companies, there's employment, there's driving a kind of knowledge economy as well. I welcome it. I think it just depends on the right attitude within the charities as well, and how forward-facing they are, and how interested they are in taking the risk of spinning out companies or working with companies, startups as well. But I think there's a tremendous amount to be learned from charities behaving like startups as well. It would be really interesting to have those kind of attitudes. It is possible.
Quick fire round.
Sure.
Yeah. A book that you would gift to a fellow biotech founder?
Good.
And what's your personal favourite book?
Well, the answer is the same book.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Evolving Ourselves by Juan Enriquez. He's more or less an investor Morris investor running Excel Capital Management. It's a book I read actually twice now, and it's just a fascinating book because he doesn't have the life science background, but he writes so well about multiple topics across life sciences, and really interesting read. And I always recommend people even who don't have the science background but are in venture capital or in business or an angel to read this book, because it's really interesting and it reads well, and it condenses a lot of the core areas that are going to affect what our next 100 or 200 years on this world looks like, and that's what I really like about that book.
Favorite podcast?
Favorite podcast? Good question. I can't say the Joe Rogan Experience, but like I said, I've broad interest, and I spoke previously about Lex Fridman. Love that series. Just everything. I don't understand the maths behind physics, but I find artificial intelligence. Everything about quantum mechanics, quantum research, areas that are just really interesting, and I like the fact that he's developed a really cool medium for this. Outside of the traditional podcasts.
Yeah, it's my favorite podcast. Lex Fridman, amazing. What's the most valuable advice you've received for yourself?
We actually have this on a quote on a mug, and it's vision without execution is merely hallucination. So I actually tell people that regularly, not to pontificate, but it's important that people who do have a vision, that if they can't build on it or they can't communicate to other people how to build on it, it's not going to happen. So that's why we say vision without execution is merely hallucination, because otherwise if you're not executing on your vision, you're just hallucinating.
Yeah. What's a failure that's kind of set you up for success in your personal life?
Failures. I'd like to say I don't have any failures yet, but that's like someone in an interview saying I don't have any weaknesses. I mean, one thing I think was interesting was that I was applying to a few PhDs, but I got rejected on the basis of, usually when you're applying for a PhD, people that are writing submissions for the PhD student, you require first class honours. First class honours say grade 1. So I got a second class honours grade 1 or something to that extent, and I was rejected as a result of that. So for a PhD. So if I did, I wasn't too set on doing a PhD, but I would have considered it if it was the right path for me. But I'm all the better for it, because I wanted to get out there in the commercial world, and I'm kind of trying to carve my own path in life, as I say, by getting the experience firsthand, working individually with companies and people and founders and startups of all different areas, not just life sciences. So I've been fortunate in that sense. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Just make sure I think about it.
And what gives you the most joy doing the job that you do right now as an associate director and a program manager?
Both. I love structure, which is what I can help bring to the table. Organization, building a community of interested people, getting them motivated to help individual founders. Obviously working with the founders as well. Working with startups in this building and in White City, but also across the world. Built up a fantastic network of just incredibly helpful people. Everything from the Bay Area to New York to Europe and Asia as well. It's just those are the things that I'm really motivated by, and especially just when people are sharing resources. And, long term, I'd love to be involved and help shape policy in Europe, especially around science entrepreneurship, and try and make that easier for people to do business, so it thrives more, and there's more funding dedicated towards companies as well. So I think there's a lot that the rest of the world, especially in Europe, can learn from the UK. I didn't talk about it previously, but structures like the tax incentives are really useful, because it helps open up the kind of the floodgates for funding for the early stage companies. So a lot of countries lack that, and I think that's one big proponent that I constantly come back to people on, is that they need more of these SEIS like structures across the world, especially Europe, so we can help generate more early stage businesses in these areas.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that concludes the interview.
Yep.
I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
It was an absolute pleasure.